The Government Digital Service, along with the rest of the UK government, is working to recast the relationship between citizens and the state. In other words, we're building a 21st century state. Today, I'd like to talk about three things that we're finding are helping us get there: delivery, strategy, and trust. Very quick disclaimer, I've only got 5 minutes, so some nuance is going to get lost almost inevitably. I know you know it's more nuanced than this. Okay. At GDS, we believe delivery, through iterative development, is the best way to figure out what works. And we do this figuring out and this delivery, we do it in teams. Working at the national level as we do is great, because it means we've got loads of teams delivering, building things, and it means we get to work out what works even more quickly. And while that's great, it's not without its challenges. It's not a neat, linear process. It can be messy having so many people working together. And that's why, to support delivery, we also need strategy and trust. So let's talk about strategy. If delivery is about figuring out what works, then strategy is about sharing that experience. What do I mean by that? Let me illustrate with an example. A few years ago, in response to growing mobile phone use in the UK, amongst citizens, various parts of the UK government began experimenting with native apps. And the results were mixed. Uptake was patchy, wasn't always great, iterating the apps wasn't always easy, and it could be expensive. When we started building GovUK, the single government website, GDS decided on a responsive web design approach. And we decided on this because we wanted the site to be easy to use on a range of mobile devices. And it worked. It worked really well for users, iteration was easier, and it cost less. So in the spirit of crafting strategy, based on what actually works, this became the government strategy. So today, teams all across the UK government, focus on building web-based services that work well on all devices. We only consider using apps when there's a very specific user need that can only be met via apps. So we worked out what works, and then we settled on it as a strategy. But knowing what works isn't the end of the story, because even when you know what works, there are often multiple ways of delivering the same outcome. And this introduces a risk, and it's the risk of many teams playing the same game, but by different rules. And that means we don't play nicely together. But in a world where services, systems, and data are so interconnected, not playing nicely together really isn't an option. The teams that build things need to be able to trust that the things they build will work well together. That's why trust is important. So how do we go about engendering this trust? We do it through standards. We don't ask people to trust blindly. Instead, we set and then we enforce an agreed way of doing what works. Standards are that agreed way. Again, an example might be helpful, just to show what can happen when we don't build to the same standard. That's Mars. So in 1999, the NASA Mars orbiter crashed. And the probe, which cost about $125 million, is believed to have crashed because of a misunderstanding between two systems built by different teams. One system, built by NASA, used metric units as per the agreed standard. The other, built by a contractor, used the non-standard imperial units. The teams didn't build to the same standard. The result was a wrong calculation, and that's why the orbiter crashed. $125 million. Because one system was using imperial units, and the other was using metric units. So that's why standards matter. And because strategy and standards are so important, we need to take them as seriously as we do delivery. And that's why they need to be clear, open and iterative. And it's also the reason why everyone has to follow them. And standards, whether they are quality standards like the UK government's Digital by Default Service Standard, which is the standard that every service has to go through before it gets exposed to people, as in our users. That's true in terms of these sorts of standards, quality ones, or if they're technical interoperability standards. It really doesn't matter. Once you have a standard, it's important they get followed. Now, doing this stuff isn't easy. But then I don't know anyone who decided to become a public servant because they wanted easy work. I think we do it because it's worthwhile. And delivery, leading to strategy based on trust through standards, mean that we can do this work of transforming the state. We can make things better. And we can do it with as many people as possible. But just as importantly, we can play nicely together while we do it. And maybe have some cake too. Delivery, strategy, and trust. Thank you.